everybody! Today I wanted to talk about sort of my reading habits and how they've changed. A lot of things and ways that I used to read and buy books and stuff in the past have definitely changed a lot now that one, I'm older, and two, I've been involved in Booktube. And so I kind of just wanted to talk about them and see if you've gone through any similar changes as your reading has evolved as you've gotten older. These are in no particular order or anything, just sort of as I'm thinking of them, but there's sort of three main things that I'm thinking of off the top of my head, and then a few that are definitely Booktube related more than anything else. The first big change I think now from when I was younger, and especially when I was a kid, is that I can't seem to read more than one book at once anymore. I don't know if any of you guys had a similar experience to this, but when I was a young kid, especially in elementary school, we'd always have some time during the day or the week during the actual school day that we were given just for independent reading. We'd have a book that we'd get from the classroom or from the school library, and we'd sit down and we'd have like 30 minutes to read or whatever. So I would have that book, right? And I would pretty much only ever read it while I was actually in school. So it's a book that was completely attached to that time of day, right? And then I would come home and have another book that I'd read on my own for myself only at home. And then I'd often have a third book that my parents and I were reading together. Sometimes as I got a little bit older, the book that I was reading in school would become the book I was also reading at home, but whatever. There's usually at least two books that I was always balancing. There was rarely a time that I only had one book going at a time. I cannot do that anymore, and I think it's because I don't have these different assigned times for reading anymore. Now that I'm an adult, the time that I'm reading is just whenever I have time and feel like it. I don't have these separate spheres of assigned time for certain books, and so now I can only handle reading one at a time. Another thing that's changed as I've gotten older is I used to go to the library all the time as a kid. We'd have those like summer reading challenge things. You'd have like a little folder, and like every time you'd finish a book, you'd like check off a little square. Every time you'd finish like a certain amount of those squares, you get a prize. And so I was there all the time for that in summer, and even when it wasn't the summer, I would just go there to get new books all the time, and I wouldn't be buying them. Whereas now that I'm an adult, I tend to buy my books instead of borrowing them. I think it's because I don't like the time restriction. I get really nervous that I'm not going to be able to make myself finish it in the allotted time because I'm so much busier now. I'm afraid of the 2-week deadline. Whereas as a kid, you know, I'm always in this hometown. I wasn't back and forth from places all the time. So yeah, I don't go to the library nearly as much now as I used to, and that makes me pretty sad. A third thing that's a very recent change is I never used to read ebooks. Now obviously when I was a little kid there were no Kindles, but ever since there have been Kindles in this house, I really was never interested in reading on them until I went abroad, and that was pretty much my only option for reading. Now that I've come home, I am still actually reading on it and enjoying it. I think I still prefer physical books, but like I never picked up ebooks before, and now I have pretty much no problem with doing either format. So that's definitely something that's changed in the past couple of years. Those are kind of the three biggest habit changes that have come not from Booktube. And then there's a whole host of other things. They're all kind of tied in together that specifically did happen because of Booktube. Before Booktube, there were two ways I'd find out about new books, right? I'd browse in a bookstore, or I'd have someone tell me about them. Those are the only two ways I pretty much ever heard about anything, and then a little bit from Goodreads once I got a Goodreads. Once I joined Booktube, the hearing it from people category expanded exponentially. Instead of having a handful of people that I know in real life telling me about books, I have hundreds of people on Booktube all recommending stuff that I would probably like. Because I now am aware of so many more books than I ever was before Booktube, that has just completely changed my mindset about how many books I want to be reading, about keeping track at all in the first place, about having unread books in my house. Like my whole attitude about a lot of those things has totally shifted now that I'm just aware of so many more books. Because think about it, if I only had 40 or 30 books that I haven't read in my house, then I'd probably just be content with that because no other recommendations were coming in that fast, and so I'd just kind of have those as my long-term sort of to be read or whatever, and I'd read them as I feel like it, and then once I ran out, I would go and look for new ones again. But now I'm constantly hearing about new ones. And so it does bother me because now instead of just having those 40 in my house that I want to read, there's also 300 more on my Goodreads I've heard about that I want to get to, but I can't yet because I have all these ones in my house. So I never used to care about getting rid of my TBR, and now I do, just because I have so many other books I now know about and want to get to. And I think it's the same reason that I now care about keeping track of how many books that I'm reading. That's something I never cared about before Booktube. I would just read when I felt like it, and I would really never worry about the numbers. And now that I'm aware of so many more books, that has totally changed the fact that I do want to pay attention to what I'm reading and who it's by and all these other things. And it's just kind of fun to compare to other people in the community. Like, you know, it's become a community thing, whereas it was never a community thing. It was a very personal thing before Booktube. I never had anybody else's books to really compare to except for my couple of friends and my mom who read. And so now I have all of these other people to compare to. Booktube has changed how much I keep track of everything. I also never used to buy books online. I think I just always probably thought of it as too risky. I probably just didn't think about it at all, actually, because I like going to a bookstore. Now that I'm part of Booktube, I'm not as concerned about that. Like, I have so many books being talked about all the time, and a lot of time there's overlap. Like, when you hear about the same books on a ton of people's channels, big or small, you're gonna feel better about just buying it from wherever. I'm still kind of wary about it because I do like supporting bookstores, especially independent bookstores, but I never ever used to buy them online, and now I do from time to time. I just ordered from a book outlet the other week, and that still hasn't come yet. And then finally, a small but really weirdly specific change that's happened ever since Booktube specifically, but in general. There's just a lot of little weird specific pet peeves that I now care about that I didn't ever used to care about. Like little ones, nothing that bothers me intensely, but little ones. I never used to think that hard about cover changes. Like, I think it probably always mildly annoyed me, but now it really annoys me. Never used to care about dog earing pages, and now it does kind of really bother me. Like, I didn't used to do it all the time when I was younger, but fairly frequently. Like, if it would take me about 3 seconds, if I didn't see a bookmark next to me or I forgot to grab one, it's getting dog-eared. Now I almost never do that. I also never used to care about cracking the spines on my books. I used to just think like it gives my books character, or I didn't think about it at all. And now, if it ever happens with one of my new books, I do get a little bit cringy about it. I'm kind of torn about it, because half of me is like, I don't care, and the other half is like, but my perfect precious book, oh, I'm so sorry. And I think that's Booktube's fault. I don't think I would have cared ever at all if Booktube people hadn't cared so much about broken spines. Not that everybody does, but a lot of people. So yeah, there's a lot of weird little nitpicky pet peeves that I now am aware of and are mildly annoyed by that I never used to care about before, which is weird. But yeah, those are some of the things that have sort of changed about my reading habits from when I was younger to now and before Booktube and now. I want to hear all about your reading habits that have changed ever since you were a kid or since joining Booktube. So please let me know down in the comments below. This has been a discussion video thing. My name is Jackie, and I will see you in my next one. Bye! Hi everybody, today I'm going to be doing a quick non-spoilery review of a monster called